I look forward to the month of May because that always to me means the Charleston Festival.
A place of great cultural interest and very beautiful.
Hello and welcome to this, the final event of Charleston Festival at home. My name is Savannah Stephenson and I'm the Artistic Director for the Charleston Festival. I'd like to use this opportunity to say thank you. I'd like to thank all the incredible speakers who gave their time to be part of this digital festival. I'd like to thank everyone at Charleston, especially Jennifer Grinley, Melissa Perkins and Gemma Patterson, as well as Diana Reich, whose work over 30 years made this the festival everyone loves. I'd also like to thank you, all the people who love and support Charleston. I'm here in the studio. This is my favourite room in the house. And it seems a fitting place to introduce this final event with the incredible contemporary artist Ai Weiwei. Ai Weiwei is in conversation on the subject of undisciplined art with curator, broadcaster and chief executive of the Design Museum, Tim Marlow. I hope you enjoy this final event and I really hope to see you here next year.
And greetings, Weiwei. Ai Weiwei, I think you're one of the people in the art world who needs very little introduction, but for those people who don't know, you're an artist, writer, activist, architect, filmmaker, among other things. You grew up in China during the Cultural Revolution and then went to America, to New York for 10 years, from 1983 to 93, before returning to China. You lived and worked in China and had various confrontations with the Chinese authorities before eventually being allowed to leave, having been imprisoned without charge for 85 days, able to leave in 2015, where you have a studio in Berlin, and now you've set up home some of the time in England, which I think is where you're joining us from now. Are you in Cambridge? Have I got that right?
You're right. You know exactly where I am. I'm in Cambridge, and it's a very sunny day. And in past 2 months, it's always like that. It's extremely beautiful, calm, and it's very nice. So I should say I really appreciate this location.
We worked together, and I came into contact with you for a wonderful show you made at the Royal Academy in 2015. And I'm always keen to keep up to date with you and to see you. I see you a lot on Instagram and social media. I was hoping to be in Charleston with you now, today, in the beautiful environment of the farmhouse that the Bloomsbury Group created, but here we are anyway, online. How do you find individual places in relationship to making art? Does Cambridge or Berlin have a direct effect on the work that you make, or can you make art anywhere?
I can make art anywhere. Also, I don't have this consciousness I really have to make art. So I live anywhere, and I live anywhere as a child. So I don't know what home really is. So I basically, we can live. I lived in all kind of conditions, and in any condition, it doesn't affect me to think or to produce something.
Do you have a sense that you're looking for somewhere that will become your permanent home, or do you feel that you're perpetually nomadic?
Either a smell or a look, it gives me some advantage. I just wandering around and always feel a little bit alert and feel a little bit foreign, and Yeah, a little bit uncomfortable, but still, it make me quite. I still very much appreciate the condition like that, as long as it's safe. Sometimes it's getting not so safe, and sometimes it's even frustrating, and because of the culture difference.
You often avoid, well, no, you don't avoid talking about yourself, that's unfair, but your art and your life seem to be devoted to bigger causes. But I am conscious, I'm curious about your own experiences growing up when you were very young in a very small, I mean, you described it as a hole in the ground in northwestern China when your father was exiled during the Cultural Revolution, to being imprisoned in a cell, never with a guard, never more than 1 meter away from you. I wonder how that psychologically is for you, and how you see the world now, particularly in Britain, in lockdown. Because we talk about lockdown as if we're imprisoned, and many of us are in our own minds, but very few of us have been through what you've been through. How does that play out for you?
Well, I think as a human, we're far more flexible than we can imagine. You can live in under any kind of condition almost. That's how we survived. And still, a large number of the human beings on the Earth planet not live like people live in England or Europe, but rather live in very difficult situation, or very different situation, I would say. So I think for too long we are thinking life is normal, which is the European life or the West. But that illusion simply being quite have strong conflicts when this coronavirus happened. So that put everybody under the same condition, and that is unthinkable. Globally, we are living under the same conditions. And in the Tang Dynasty, there's a poem said, when the moon rises, and we do feel we are all, under the same light. But the moon, certainly half of the world would see sun at the same time. But under this coronavirus, we all been locked in. We all share this kind of frustration and scaredness, and and this also not so certain. Where we share this kind of uncertainty, and still we are in it. It's very, very interesting phenomenon.
You have worked across a whole range of different artistic media. As I said, you make films, you make art, you work with different materials, found materials, different processes. You write, you campaign. Do you feel that there's a search for which medium you most want to be across, to use, or are the different media that you use just that which happens to seem the most convenient to explore the thing that you want to explore? Because just so many artists are driven by the processes of the material and the process and the area that they're across. And with you,
restaurant, I always look at the other people's dish. I realize, it's very different. In the West, you order your own dish, but in China, you have a group sharing dishes. So none of you would programming your eating program the same, because you pick up this one combined to another one. So it's such a variation, and also even in China, this is maybe thousands of restaurants there. None of them have the same menu, and even they have the same menu, open up the food you never even can recognize. So we have a very different culture. We appreciate variation and to change, to make a difference. So that's how I really once I get too familiar with one language or media, I would drop it. I would, I would move on because I simply lost the interest of people doing the same thing.
Nonetheless, you've maintained an interest in traditional Chinese craftsmanship throughout your working life as an artist, carving and metalwork. And in some ways, it connects you back through the last 40, 50 years to something much deeper, much longer historically. Does that still seem important to you? Do those traditions still seem important to you?
I think tradition is not a skill, but rather a way of understanding and to interpreting our time. So through those craftsmanship or skill, you see the language being used and how they masterizing those languages are truly amazing. Because we all, as individuals, we only have a certain time. Maybe you're working for 30 years, 40 years, if you're lucky, maybe 50 years for working. And you only can really acquire very limited, skills. And today, of course, we don't need to use hands that much. We don't produce things by hands. We just do online or computer or do some programming. But our human intelligence maybe 99% come from how our hands teaches us and how our memory is relating to our hands respond to different materials or skills or kind of language. We always want to touch it. We are always trying to imagine how it's being made. So those things gradually maybe it's going to disappear. When we don't see those things that much. So we become another type of a human being. We are being cut off because those food suppliers would prepare everything, would be put on the supermarket on the shelf. So I really always wondering my son, my son generation, my child, they have been dramatically lost so much knowledge because knowledge is really gained by each generation. If you cannot pass it, life it doesn't require that kind of difficulty or that kind of moment. So our sense about time are changed. Our sense about the space are changed. That's the fundamental change about humanity or philosophy. So yeah, it's fascinating to see just say past decades how much human has been changed.
Yes, I mean your son is I think 11 years old. You say that there's a lot of knowledge being lost, but of course there's a lot of knowledge being gained by that generation that your generation and my generation didn't have at all, which obviously we're both in agreement on that. What about the idea of fracture and break with tradition and the past? I mean, you made a piece where you photographed yourself dropping a Han Dynasty urn in 3 parts, and we saw it shatter. And this was always seen as iconoclastic. It was seen as perhaps a commentary on the brutalization of things like the Chinese Cultural Revolution and the loss of a connection with the past. What role does iconoclasm play for you as a creative force?
I think it's fundamental. As a question, I appreciate the quality of in questioning our past, but not to refuse the past. But in questioning is very different. It's to examine and to adjust our position to the existing power, existing structure. So that requires you has at least 2 abilities. One is to respect the memory, the knowledge of the past, only by understanding the past and to have the knowledge, you can really make an attack to it. You really can question, otherwise your question is not valid. So I think you need a strong curiosity, and of course you have to have the attitude of in questioning whatever is being presented there.
You, in one particular place now, you're confined, you're locked down. You were locked in China for a long time, and you made over 100 exhibitions around the world without being able to travel to see them. So that you clearly have the capacity to be able to work from distance. But given your work in the last 4 or 5 years since you've left China has involved a lot of research with you physically in places, surveying and exploring and documenting the refugee crisis, for example. I wonder how you're finding lockdown creatively now. Is it stopping you do a lot of what you want to do, or can you find ways around that?
I think to being not able to move around is really can create a better condition for mentally activities, thinking, and or even to imagine, or to create some ability which can erase the distance of physical being there. And I think you don't need to run around to get to become spiritually enlightened. And of course, to run around, it could gain a lot of knowledge, experience, and besides that, to read or to think, it's equally important. So very unfortunately, we don't have this kind of luxury to balance both activities.
You've always found time to think, though, even when life has been incredibly fraught and busy, you've always been able to contemplate and meditate?
I think the tactics is when you're involved, you really get yourself deeply involved. You have to really get hurt. Then you are being pushed away. Then you have plenty of time and to like a healing. To really to rethink about the whole process. So I always. It works for me very well, and unfortunately, very often it's not willingly or designed by myself, but I always get myself deeply involved, and also I get, I think I learn from it. I appreciate the problems.
If we weren't in this situation, you would have just opened an exhibition or an installation in London at the Imperial War Museum called A History of Bombs. Do you want to just explain what that installation would have been and what it will be?
I visited the museum. It's interesting, I immediately attracted by the history, and if in England, without knowing the history of the war, and simply, basically, nothing about England, actually. And I know very little. So and at the same time, I was doing some studies on refugees. I did this human flow from 2015 till now. We're still making films about the refugee situation. Then the understanding of a war or of the weapon and those things come along with it. So we did the research about just pick up very simple fact like who creates all those bombs, at what time and how it's being used, and what is the power of each of them. and the scientific data. So we collect the most commonly being used or famously being used bonds and put together. And I think that would fit into Royal War Museum very well. First, I make it more like two-dimensional, so it can be applied on any two-dimensional surface, such as the ground. We don't have much two-dimensional surface there. So
no, it's filled with planes and tanks and weaponry.
So we don't want to move away any objects. They have weapons or vehicles. So I said, okay, but we can, the people have to walk on ground. So we put on the ground and on the some surface of the elevator. So you can see the actual size of those bombs, and they're quite fascinating. They have names. Some of them are very well known. Some are not very well
known. And so this is an installation in a kind of vinyl format on the floor.
It will cover if you walk into the room, it will cover every surface to a flat surface, floor on some vertical elements. So
I think people are curious about the process of how you work in that situation. So you spend a lot of time researching subjects, and then the subjects you're researching sometimes have resonance for commissions or projects that you do, rather than you start with a blank sheet of paper or a building in which you are going to make new work. Is that right? Is that, broadly speaking, how we describe the way you work?
In my case, I have my own interests. I normally don't do just pure commissions, and those interests has been developed along with my curiosity, and very often it takes years to come out. Like this study of bombs also take about 3-4 years. And even just make those, we not simply make a drawing, we make this kind of, format you can really digitally print out the three-dimensional objects. So, you build up this kind of model. And it's really fun work. But along, always lucky, there's a project which some of our intentions can perfectly fit into it. This Victoria War Museum project is exactly like this.
I also saw on your Instagram, you seem to be working around the theme of masks. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Oh, I'm sorry. If it's our conversation before yesterday, I can tell you. But yesterday, it's going to be a project, a public project, but I cannot announce it now.
I love this.
You'll see it. You'll find out very soon.
Because if you follow your Instagram, one sees things, but you don't see anything more than an image. And I wasn't sure whether that was a tease or whether it was something you were going to talk about.
For me, it's like a diary. I'm very visual person. I need a visual moment, which can be very private moment, and only I know what it means. I put in there, and I enjoy people are guessing what is it. But sometimes later people realize, what is it? Yeah.
I remember you telling me that when you were imprisoned by the Chinese authorities, and then when you were released, no one knew where you were. And am I right? You worked out eventually where they'd imprisoned you, and then went and photographed it, and just Instagrammed that image, but didn't say what it was.
Yes. When I was in this secret detention, I gradually realized not only myself don't know where I am, but the guards the military soldiers, they also don't know. They had been standing there with sealed vehicles. The first day they joined the army, then the whole training is in that base. Then the last day they will be shipped out to their hometown, which can be thousands of miles away. But they would never know the name of the location and where it is and who they are with. Someone like me, they would never know my name. They only know my number. Actually, my number is my room number, the sales number. But I managed to have build up communication. I'm a master of building communications because they think me as a very dangerous person, but they don't know what kind of crime. They know all you call it suspect. So the God is there is trying to protect me not be hurt by myself or by any other possibilities. And but I really, I always think they're also human beings. They also want to communicate. They want to know a little bit more about me. So we build up some kind of communication, and only we can know what we're talking about. But the camera, there's 3 cameras in the room. They can never tell. They cannot tell. We are telling our very personal stories to each other, but our lips are not moving. So, we enjoy to do that. But QI suddenly was released. They also very surprised, So before I left, I just pronounced my telephone number, and somehow one of them remembered. And a year later, he was off the post. My phone rings. So we got together and we chatted. And I'm so disappointed that he couldn't tell me anything about the location. It's not that he doesn't want to. It's just he's like a prisoner like me. So, but I managed to find out. And thanks for Google Maps. Today I have a very good sense of the architecture or city planning. So we drove to there, found the location, and I photographed it at the same spot I posted on my Instagram. And later I called the police. I said, I found it out. They hung it up. And the next time I went there, they moved. The whole location being shut down. Because one phone call, I said, I see the location now. Yeah.
2 things that strike me from that story, which I've never heard the full extent of. One is your capacity to find things out. And the second is the ruthless speed with which the Chinese authorities can act if they feel there's a threat or things that they don't want. You're making a film at the moment, or you're in the process of making a film in Wuhan, where the COVID-19 crisis began. How are you, without giving too much away, or give as much as you want, how are you going about that, and what are you discovering?
Well, first I have a curiosity. And once you have curiosity, that's a problem. And my curiosity is only happens when something needs to be hid. I would ask what they're hiding and why they have to hide it. Why they have to hide it if this is just a disease or something. Why the people they love the most, they cannot tell them the complete story. Why they need the world so much and the world loves them so much, but at the same time, they don't trust each other. They never trust each other. So that always, for me as a little artist individual, before I pass away, I like to to understand a little bit more, because it's so confusing here. If you see how the disease happened from Wuhan gradually to the whole world now, still it only creates more misery and misunderstanding than anything. So, anybody would be very curious, but I have ability to making the so-called underground films. And I made many films about Sichuan earthquake investigation, about those dead students, 5,000 of them. We found their name, birthday, and their locations. So for me, it's not a big deal. As long as we have internet, and we have a lot of artists locked into that city. Some are as patients, some as doctors, and everything is just a phone call away. And I'm making film not to attack or criticize China. It's my nation. It's not something I like to have a habit to attack it. But I also am like a doctor trying to find what is the real problem. I like to use my way to illustrate or to narrate the condition. So I think that would give some kind of important reference or understanding for the world to understand China, and for Chinese also to understand themselves. But that's not going to happen because my film can never be shown in China, nothing online. My name cannot be mentioned. So it's kind of ridiculous. You make a film about China, but at the same time, Chinese people cannot see it. That will always put me down so much, So I have to cook a Chinese food for a British person, or German. So immediately I would lose some passion about it.
Well, you mentioned the Sichuan earthquake in 2008, and you and other friends and activists of yours, as you said, compiled a list of over 5,400 school children who were killed. But there was a direct discovery that there was corruption and ineptness around building regulations that meant that schools were particularly vulnerable to the earthquake. And then you made a very powerful series of artworks, including a piece called Straits that was shown at the Royal Academy, where you acquired the rebar that was at the heart of those destroyed buildings to straighten them out and made this amazing wave. Now, the work you're doing in Wuhan now, where you say so potently that you can't show it to the people in China to understand about themselves, but are you discovering specific discernible conspiracy, or is it just a lack of knowledge and understanding amongst different people as to how things are being covered up?
You act more like an investigator than me. I it's not my intention to find any secret. The whole secret is very open. It's not, the real problem is not there's a hidden secret. You can imagine what happened, why it happens in Wuhan, why there's a very high tech scientific research center about this particular virus. It doesn't take you don't require any intelligence to draw some kind of perspective. But that's not my purpose. My understanding is what is beyond this. China has been so loved by the world for past decades. China become like today, or even they have any possible potential to threat, it's only come from our West. We created this. It's very clear. We need China more, just as much as China need the West. So even with this kind of this research center, we know at least French, Canadian, and U.S. either money or technology or direct involvement are invested in this center. That's quite surprising, just a research center in Wuhan, a city most people would never even heard or remember in their lifetime in the West, but suddenly become most well-known location. So we have to really see this crisis as an alarm about how today it functions, the society functions globally, and if we're not learning from this, and there will be certainly some other crisis happen.
Well, over the last decade, you've had 2 studios demolished in China by the authorities, but you still have a house and studio there now. Are you still producing any work within China?
I'm a product of China. I'm the artworks of this so-called Ai Weiwei's art, and yes, I think that answers everything. And yes, I do. As long as I'm alive, yeah, I do.
But will you ever be able to go back to China, do you think?
I think if I trust their promise, yes. They said I'm a free person, and I'm never been really officially charged. They just trying to dirt my name or something like that. But so to make sure what they said is right, and also to make sure they understand I'm not scared. Right after I got my passport, I went back again. I just want to test that. And nobody touched me. They seems quite kept their promise or their so unless they change their mind, I still assume I can go back because I'm a Chinese citizen. But I can never really it can never be guaranteed I still can come out. Because so many my friends, lawyers and activists, they either disappeared or they end up in jail, and no lawyer can see them, and their family cannot see them. It's just very common, and also the whole world accept it. We all think that's their own business.
Why do you think you were able in the end to get out? Why do you think you didn't disappear?
I thought you somehow made some kind of effort to rescue me. I really don't know. It's very, very that's very problem with someone with have a great curiosity like me. That's always the question I would ask. How come I ended up in Cambridge or in Germany? And there's a lot of theory, but none of them can really prove themselves. Because there's a lot of argument directly against those kind of theories. Because in I think maybe I'm not dangerous. They realize, I'm just a very friendly artist.
But you have brought attention to millions of people around the world, different issues from the current Chinese state, specifically the curtailing of freedom of expression, but also to the refugee crisis that is the problem of the West and is a global problem. And I just wonder whether you still feel that art actually can make a difference. That's why you do it, because in the end, there is a chance that art may change the way people see the world and think, even if it's a small amount. But if enough people think differently, things can change. Is that a motivation for you, or am I sounding too
I
romantic?
should say I'm a very selfish person, self-centered. So art certainly made a huge difference on my life and my understanding of the world. So that means the art makes a difference to the world because I am my world, and without my understanding or my consciousness, the world simply not exist. There could be there's another world we never conscious about, and if we think that way, the art it's amazing. It does so much to me, and I assume there's a lot of people. If I assume I'm just a normal guy, that means there's millions just like me. So if it affects me, it must affect, average guy like me. So either way, I think it benefits me a lot.
I think you're many things, Weiwei, but average, you're certainly not. It's always enlightening and a pleasure to talk to you. It's frustrating not to be down in the beautiful Sussex countryside in Charleston with you face to face. And technology has its problems, but it also opens the world up. So it's still been a privilege to talk to you digitally. Ai Weiwei, thank you very much. Stay healthy, stay strong.
Thank you. It's so nice talking to you digitally. You're much friendlier, and thank you.